Hello boys and girls. Got another video for you fine folks on the internet today. Continuing the Matthew Buckley Talks music series. Sort of a sequel, if you will, to the last installment where we looked at the Sunfighter album by Paul Kantner and Grace Slick. This time we'll be taking a look at Baron von Tollbooth and the Chrome Nun. Credited to Paul Kantner and Grace Slick with David Freiberg. Released in May of 1973 on Grunt Records in the United States on vinyl, 8-track, and cassette. Concurrently issued in France, Germany, Israel, Italy, Japan, Spain, and the United Kingdom. Issued on the RCA and Victor Records label in New Zealand on vinyl, and a couple years later in 1975 reissued for Italian markets as an RCA, Victor, and Grunt collaborative reissue, and then a couple years later reissued for US and Spanish markets on vinyl. A few years later in 1980 given another United States vinyl reissue, and in 1981 was reissued by RCA Records and Grunt Records as an Italian import as part of a Best Buy series. And in 1997, RCA Records produced the first CD master issue, and it was concurrently issued by BMG and RCA Records in European markets on CD. And then in 2011, BGO Records issued a UK CD reissue, and most recently in 2020 it was remastered and reissued again for UK markets by Esoteric Recordings. So a little background on the album. After the release of the Sunfighter album in November 1971, which I discussed at length in my previous Matthew Buckley Talks music video, the work at Grunt Records continued, as would the transition in the greater Jefferson Airplane and Jefferson Starship family. At the end of the year, in December of 1971, the self-titled solo debut album by American blues violinist Papa John Creech, who had recently joined the fold of the Jefferson Airplane family. He put out his solo album, and it was the third album issued on Grunt Records, and it featured instrumental contributions from members of Jefferson Airplane and Starship, members of Quicksilver Messenger Service, members of Tower of Power, and even Santana and the Grateful Dead. 2 months later, in February of 1972, Jorma Kaukonen and Jack Cassidy would issue the first studio album release credited to Hot Tuna, titled Burgers, which would peak at number 68 on the US Billboard 200 album chart. In addition to Papa John Creech, the album also included a vocal feature from David Crosby on the track Highway Song, and organ and piano contributions from Nick Buck, who was also featured on Papa John's album. In 2 more months, Grunt Records would see its next release, the self-titled debut album by West Coast singer and songwriter Jack Bonus, his only full-length album ever released. Issued in April of 1972, the album was produced and arranged by Bonus. His songs ranged in style from Americana-influenced psychedelic rock to gospel-flavored songs with Latin and Afro-Cuban rhythms. The next month, Grunt Records would issue the debut solo album by Jorma Kaukonen's younger brother Peter Kaukonen, titled Black Kangaroo. Joey Covington of the Airplane supplied drums, and much of the resulting psychedelic and hard rock album has often been compared to the guitar heroics of Jimi Hendrix and blues pioneer Johnny Winter. As the Jack Bonus album was being mixed and mastered and prepared for release, and recordings were wrapping up for the Black Kangaroo album, all of the current core members of Jefferson Airplane being Paul Kantner, Grace Slick, Jorma Kaukonen, Jack Cassidy, Joey Covington, and Papa John Creech. All reconvened at Wally Heider's studio in March 1972 for recording sessions that would ultimately stretch across 3 months. The tensions from within the band would continue to escalate during this time, and in the midst of bumping egos, Joey Covington left the band, and supplementary drum duties were handled by Sammy Paeza of Hot Tuna and John Barbata, who had drummed with both the Turtles and Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. The album was released in July of 1972, peaking at number 20 on the U.S. Billboard 200 album chart. And the band organized a 2-month U.S. tour, featuring a new lineup of Kantner, Slick, Kaukonen, Cassidy, Papa John, along with John Barbata on drums, as well as former Quicksilver Messenger Service bass player David Freiberg, who provided additional miscellaneous instrumentation and vocals. The tour would culminate in 2 professionally recorded gigs at Winterland Ballroom in San Francisco, featuring a guest appearance by former Airplane vocalist Marty Balin. These would be the final Jefferson Airplane concerts until their 1989 reunion tour. And after the Winterland shows and the end of the tour, Papa John Creech released his second solo album, having been recorded at Paramount Recording Studios, backed instrumentally by the American blues band Zulu, featuring a young musician on guitar by the name of Kevin Moore, who would go on to record under the name of Keb Mo. At the year's end, Grunt Records would issue a self-titled album by an unconventional group simply called One, with honestly a story of their own that is far too absurd to begin delving into in this video, but it is worth noting that the album includes vocals by Signe Anderson, original Jefferson Airplane lead vocalist, credited on the release as Signe Coleman. She's part of a wordless choir on the album. It's truly a bizarre project with an equally bizarre cast of characters pulling the strings. But that being said, with the new year underway, the Jefferson Airplane band members took some time off, and by spring of 1973 had edited, mixed, and mastered the September 1972 Winterland Ballroom concert recordings, as well as a few recorded performances from August of 1972 at the Chicago Auditorium. They'd prepped these for a proper album release as their second live album, issued in April of 1973 as 30 Seconds Over Winterland, which charted at number 52 on the U.S. Billboard 200 album chart. The following May, the 11th album issued on the Grunt Records imprint would see release in the form of Baron von Tollbooth and the Chrome Nun, which, as I said, was credited to Paul Kantner, Grace Slick, and David Freiberg. Having been recorded at Wally Heider's studio in November and December following the final Jefferson Airplane tour, the group presumably prioritized the preparation of the live tapes for release, and after finalizing those mixes, Kantner, Slick, and Freiberg would have turned their attention to working further with their studio recordings. Once again, falling under the greater Planet Earth Rock and Roll Orchestra umbrella, the album features contributions from Jefferson Airplane members, old and new, Jerry Garcia and Mickey Hart of the Grateful Dead, Chris Etheridge of the Flying Burrito Brothers, John Barbata, who had, as I said earlier, drummed with Crosby, Stills, and Nash and was the de facto new drummer for Jefferson Airplane. And speaking of CSNY, even David Crosby himself makes an appearance on this record. And there are also guest vocals from the Pointer Sisters, so this really is a smorgasbord of varying musicians. But onto the album itself. Before I forget, it is worth pointing out that the title, Baron von Tollbooth and the Chrome Nun, actually came from David Crosby, a nickname he had given to Paul Kantner and Grace Slick, Paul being very German, hence Baron von Tollbooth, and Grace, having so many heavy conceptual ideas being the Chrome Nun. I believe she actually even dressed as a nun for one of Jefferson Airplane's early television appearances. But anyway, side A of the record opens with the track Ballad of the Chrome Nun, which is one of the album's more swinging songs. An ensemble of voices and guitars just belt away. The song features Kantner on rhythm guitar and vocals, Grace on vocals, Freiberg on piano and vocals, John Barbata on drums and percussion, Chris Etheridge on bass guitar, Jerry Garcia on both electric guitar and steel guitar, Craig Chaquiso on lead guitar, and David Crosby on vocals. It's a true collaborative effort from the various San Francisco musicians of the Planet Earth Rock and Roll Orchestra collective. The opening guitar lines just sound so triumphant, like the launching of fireworks. It's really, spectacular, and the piano marches proudly into the mix. Jerry's steel guitar playing gives this song a special sunset or sunrise flavor, if I could say such. And Chaquiso's lead guitar brings the bite to back the lyrical content. Music is credited to David Freiberg and lyrics credited to Grace Slick. The song is another acerbic rejection of common religious conventions. I've always loved the line, nobody needs to baptize me. Anytime I laugh, I've got religion. Cross my forehead, cross my knees. I'll take any good sign, I'm a clay pigeon. It's one of Grace's more, dare I say, fun and carefree rips into organized religion. As I listen, I can easily visualize the band tearing into the song on stage, belting the lyrics in Ragtag Harmony. This is a killer album opener and definitely one of my favorites from this whole Jefferson Airplane adjacent canon. It's pretty accessible, honestly, and feels entirely realized, from the composition itself to the performance and recording down to the finer points of the mix. The following track, Fat, was written entirely by Grace, a commentary of both society at large and people as individuals. Grace herself says in the CD liner notes, there's a number of levels there. Fat meaning literally. Fat meaning filled with useless information that holds you back. She sings about how no one uses doors anymore, in her ever incredibly powerful voice, I might add. In addition to lead vocal, Grace supplies piano on the track, accompanied by Kantner on rhythm guitar and vocal, Garcia on lead guitar, Chris Etheridge on bass guitar, John Barbata on drums and percussion, David Freiberg on keyboards, as well as special guest vocalists, the Pointer Sisters. I've always loved this song as well. It features some of Grace's grandiose piano playing that decorates both the Blows Against the Empire album and the Sunfighter album, and of course this one. Stunningly jazzy playing, but still heavy enough for a rock and roll context. That being said, everyone on this track is pulling their weight, especially the Pointer Sisters, doing some call and response type vocal stuff, but the star on this track is definitely Grace. Fantastic song. I'd say 5 out of 5 stars. And the next track, Flowers of the Night, was written by longtime Airplane and Starship associate Jack Traylor, who also provides lead vocals and acoustic guitar. Backed by Kantner on vocals and electric rhythm guitar, Chris Etheridge on bass guitar, John Barbata on drums, David Freiberg on keyboards and vocals, and Grace exclusively on vocals. The song has an old-timey feel, almost medieval in its execution. The drum introduction is deceptively modern in its feel. There are a couple times the track has come on and I've thought, like, what, did I suddenly switch to some, later 70s funk project, or is this about to go into like a hip hop drum beat, breakbeat type thing? But once the stinging electric guitar leads make themselves known, the song slides into an unshakable folk rock groove. And Trailer's vocals are delivered with such a swagger and swing that when the backing vocals join in, it really sounds almost in the vein of an old-timey drinking song. The lyrics tell of the violence of wars of old and wars supported by the church. Overall, dark subjects. Worthy of note is the last verse. Old men get some soldiers. Keep them close at hand. The seeds that were sown yesterday now flower in the land. And guard yourself most carefully with military might, for plants that cannot bloom by day must flower in the night. It's good shit. The next track, Walkin', is credited to Kantner and Slick, Grace credited with lyrics, and Paul credited with both music and words. In the CD liner notes, they both speak somewhat dismissively of the track, Kantner simply referring to it as, quote, a little rhythm piece, and Grace calling it a desperate little manic depressive thing. I myself enjoy the song. It feels carefree and maybe a bit careless, too. I really love the second verse Grace delivers hard and fast. I'm going down, and if I don't come back, tie all my dope to a wire wheel track. Give it to the man who will have them back. I love that. And there's some fun musical interplay as well. The track features Kantner on rhythm guitar and vocals, Grace on piano and vocals, John Barbata on drums and percussion, Chris Etheridge on bass guitar, Jerry Garcia on both lead guitar and banjo, Papa John Creech on violin, and David Freiberg on vocals. It's another track where the group dynamic really comes through. Like I said, there's dynamite interplay between Grace's piano, John's violin, and Jerry's guitar, as well as his overdubbed banjo. The vocals are totally unrestrained and full of attitude. It's more of that Ragtag Harmony stuff I mentioned earlier. And this is a great tune, honestly. I mean, how can I not love a song where the chorus includes the lyrics, "Baby, get you high on me"? The following track, "Your Mind Has Left Your Body," speaking of getting high, was written entirely by Paul Kantner. And in addition to lead vocals, he plays 12-string guitar, accompanied by Grace Slick on piano and vocals, David Freiberg on keyboards and vocals, Jerry Garcia on steel guitar, John Barbata on drums, Jack Cassidy on bass guitar, and Jorma Kaukonen on lead guitar, with Mickey Hart providing gongs and water phones, whatever water phones are. The song is appropriately surreal to match its title. It's often been simply surmised as being an acid song, but in the CD liner notes, Kantner himself states that it goes way beyond acid, going on to say that was just exploration into the speed of imagination and letting it go full flow, a bit of when your body dies and you float away from it. Adding that actually you don't even have to die for it to do that. That thing of getting out of your own experience and just putting yourself into another thing and trying to absorb it and the values of that. Heady concepts in any case. Kantner and Grace sing about seeing and feeling all of the world around you, from the city you live in to the polar ice caps and the sands of Zanzibar. They sing of the connectedness of every moment through time. And particularly worthy of pointing out is the chorus, "Riders of the Rainbow, let it grow, let it grow." It feels like a quiet anthemic mantra in the context of the song, or like something of an epiphany. And it's also worth pointing out, again, as I said, that both Jorma Kaukonen and Jack Cassidy are on this track. It's definitely one of the last tracks to feature that core Jefferson Airplane quintet of Kantner, Grace, Kaukonen, and Cassidy for many years. So it's definitely noteworthy for that. But this song ends side A with that significance. And side B opens with Across the Board, written and sung solely by Grace. She is accompanied by David Freiberg on keyboards, Chris Etheridge on bass guitar, John Barbata on drums, and Jerry Garcia on electric guitar. Very dramatic piano begins the song. Grace singing and likening the listener to a bullet that was never fired, just sitting in the barrel of a gun, getting old and tired. There is some further innuendo throughout the lyrics as she sings about the listener needing a man all the way across the floor, and about how the man's only got one finger, and most suggestively about 7 inches of pleasure, 7 inches going home. Somebody must have measured all the way down the old bone. In the CD liner notes, in reference to the song's opening verse, Grace states that the song is about people hanging around complaining about their lives, saying that song is pretty much elaborating on get a life. In any case, it's a powerful and adventurous composition from Grace. And the next track, Harp Tree Lament, is a real standout on the album. Music composed by David Freiberg and lyrics written by Robert Hunter, lyricist of the Grateful Dead. Freiberg plays piano and keyboard and takes lead vocal, accompanied by Paul Kantner on guitar, glass harp, and vocals, Chris Etheridge on bass guitar, John Barbata on drums, and Grace Slick, again exclusively on vocals. In the CD liner notes, Freiberg states that he had been tinkering with the chord changes for some time before Hunter actually set lyrics to them. But the collaborative process, he says, happened fairly smoothly and quickly. He went on to describe the song as an esoteric thing that eludes him in meaning to this day, in spite of being able to describe it as a sort of Scottish ballad. And the vocal delivery does follow a rhythm and sway that invokes, it does indeed invoke kind of a shanty-esque feeling, albeit a cosmic and psychedelic one. Kantner in the CD liner notes describes it as a nice portrait of another quantum universe, both old and future, drawing on the medieval as well as the hillbilly. Honestly, each verse has lyrics worthy of highlighting, but I will settle for simply putting a spotlight on the bridge. Turn around, by the by, you'll see the sea, you'll still see the sea, as it was in the dawning, as it always will be. As great. Robert Hunter is a hell of a lyricist. There's so much, like I said, you could highlight every single verse in this song. It's beautiful. There's beautiful words, beautiful harmonies, no superfluous instrumentation, a heartfelt melody. I love it. 5 out of 5 stars. The following track, White Boy, parenthetical, Trans-Caucasian Air Machine Blues, was written entirely by Paul Kantner. Kantner plays rhythm guitar, glass harmonica, and takes lead vocals, accompanied by Grace on piano and vocals, Freiberg on keyboards and vocals, Jack Cassidy on bass guitar, John Barbata on drums and percussion, Jerry Garcia on lead guitar, and Jack Traylor on vocals. The song takes a radical spin on racism and xenophobia, posing the wonderful question of where exactly the white man comes from, in figurative and literal sense. Worth highlighting are the lyrics, "Do you come from the earth? Do you come from the sky? Nobody seems to know. You build and you burn, create and destroy. You rule me now, fair-skinned man, with an unfair hand. In the CD liner notes, Kantner simply states, "We're out of place here," in reference to the song. And the next track, Fishman, was written entirely by Grace Slick. Grace plays piano and takes lead vocals solo, accompanied by Jerry Garcia and Craig Chaquiso on guitar, Jack Cassidy on bass guitar, and John Barbata on drums and percussion. In the CD liner notes, Grace states that the song was written for Paul Kantner, calling it, quote, a weird-ass love song. She makes clear the euphemism in the lyrics, "they both dance lying down," giving some obvious context for the song. In any case, it's a fun, adventurous, rocking number, still filled with plenty of surreal imagery. Swim over my body with the sea in his hands. I'll have him again on Andromeda's sands. I love that. It's definitely an ambitious composition from Grace. Another ambitious one. And the following track, Sketches of China, was co-written by Kantner and Slick. Once again, Grace credited with lyrics and Paul credited with both music and lyrics. Kantner plays 12-string guitar and sings lead vocal. Grace plays piano and also takes co-lead vocals. David Freiberg plays keyboards and gives some supporting vocal. The three are accompanied by Chris Etheridge on bass guitar, Jerry Garcia on lead guitar, John Barbata on drums, Jack Traylor on vocals, and Mickey Hart on gongs. The aforementioned gongs usher in the track. Gentle guitar supporting a soft vocal from Grace about some figure who is stronger by talk than by sight, but by sight he'll know you. The layers gradually build, and after 2 verses, Kantner jumps in on vocals. The song really grows into something of an epic. Garcia lays down some sublime guitar work. The chorus washes over like waves of an epiphany. It ain't what you want, it's what you need. That's, oh my gosh. And the first time they sing it around, they sing, I'd rather be here than yesterday. It's fantastic, just fantastic. There's, of course, some more mind-bending and pseudo-historical lyrics throughout. In the CD liner notes, Kantner claims this to be, quote, probably the strangest song I've ever written, going on to say he has no idea where it came from, adding, it goes such odd places. It uses China as a milieu to work out of. History, again. As the song fades out on the chorus, you almost can't help but feel inspired. End side B. So, final thoughts. Another one of my all-time favorite records. This was a critically important transitionary project for all the players involved, but particularly the musicians credited on the title, Paul Kantner, Grace Slick, and David Freiberg. Jefferson Airplane was no longer a functioning unit, and by the end of the next year would be rebirthed as Jefferson Starship, with not only the core trio of this album at the helm, but with heavy involvement from young guitarist Craig Chaquiso as well. And aside from pointing the way to the future of Jefferson Starship, the album was also another product of the experimentations and cross-collaborations of the Planet Earth Rock and Roll Orchestra collective of musicians. And I've always felt this album to be something of a sequel, a bit of a stronger sequel in some ways, to the Sunfighter album credited to Paul Kantner and Grace Slick, which itself is something of a sequel to the Blows Against the Empire album credited to Paul Kantner and Jefferson Starship. Each of the albums in this trilogy have a distinct personality and overall vibe of their own. The Blows Against the Empire album is decidedly science fiction in its concept and themes, feeling very much like a space-age adventure with a clear narrative. The Sunfighter album is much more of the Earth, inspired by real experiences that Kantner and Slick underwent as they gave birth to a daughter and moved out of San Francisco to Bolinas. And the album also had a fair amount of songs about the environment and ecology as well, dealing with themes of pollution and, just the state of the world, not even socially, but just as far as, the living conditions. And that's not to disregard a few of the more surreal and cosmic songs that were on the album. Some of the dream-like psychedelic sequences that are on the Sunfighter album. But when you get to the Baron von Tollbooth and the Chrome Nun album, it definitely leans a bit heavier in that surreal, psychedelic, cosmic vein. It tackles themes of theology, history, racism, xenophobia, astral projection, mental hang-ups, and more. As I said in my review of Sunfighter, there are definitely a few songs from that project that I think would fit on this album, but I don't think the inverse is as true. Maybe Across the Board or Fishman, a couple of the Grace songs, but that's it, I'd say, and I'm not 100% sure how well they would really fit. So all in all, I'd say that this album is both sequenced very well and flows somewhat better than its predecessor, both on a song-to-song basis and thematically. So let me get a closer look for you guys here at this record. The cover has some lovely artwork, some strange artwork as well, of Paul, Grace, and David in kind of a diagram cross-section type deal where you see their muscles and inner workings and whatnot. I can't tell if these are supposed to be like curtains or like drooping rugs, like some sort of Dali-esque thing, since they're down here as well, but it is pretty cool. And you got what appears to be some sort of leopard as well, mountains behind them. It's a very, very powerful aesthetic in this image. And the frame is pretty nice too, the text on the little gold plaques. Honestly, I'm a little more fond of the back cover art, though, with what appears to be the Earth and the Moon and their rotations, with these two almost celestial human bodies on either side. It's a very, very, again, powerful image, in my opinion. Just leaves me kind of speechless. And on the inside, we got a nice little insert here that's got the tracks, songwriter info and publishing info, as well as personnel credits, who wrote what, who plays what, side A, side B. And then on the inner sleeve, we have some custom print here. You got the lyrics, another interesting body diagram with the Grunt Records logo, and this interesting little text up here about good health. Good health is the reward of mankind for comprehension and adherence to the definite physical and chemical laws dominating our bodily processes. The virtues of good health are contentment, happiness, and longevity, the product of these becoming posterity's noble heritage. And down here there's some production credits, engineering credits, and thanks. Illustrations by Drew Struzman, Bill Garland. So those two handled the artwork. And on the back of the inner sleeve, you get more lyrics and some nicely or crudely, depending on how you look at it, edited images of Grace, Paul, and David. So, you know, there's plenty to enjoy looking at with this album, in addition to all the fantastic sounds within. So, personally, I sort of hesitate. I'm a little on the fence. I don't know. I've kind of debated if I should rate this 9 or 10. But just because of the fact that I think it is a little bit stronger than the Sunfighter album, like, honestly, I don't want to open up the half-star ratings, but, you know, I want to rate it 9.5 out of 10. But it's strong enough that I think I will rate it a solid 10 out of 10. You know, it's got some friggin' killer songs. It's got some rockin' songs. It's got some sweet songs. And again, the period of time that it captured, the transition and shift for all of these musicians, whether it be the Jefferson Airplane into Jefferson Starship transition, or the various experimentations of, you know, for instance, Jerry Garcia's steel guitar flirtations ended very shortly after this. So this is one of the last examples of the sweet sounds he would make with that instrument. So there's a whole lot to love out of this album, and every time I come back to it, I feel all the more enriched. So, all this being said, 30 plus minutes of rambling, more like 36 plus minutes of rambling. Let me know in the comments below, have you heard this album? I would imagine you're at least vaguely familiar with Paul Kantner and Grace Slick of Jefferson Airplane and Jefferson Starship, since Airplane and Starship are basically household names. But are you familiar with David Freiberg of Quicksilver Messenger Service? And have you heard any of the other Jefferson Airplane adjacent projects that were put out around this time in the early 70s in collaboration as the Planet Earth Rock and Roll Orchestra collective of musicians guest starred all over each other's projects? Because, again, I can't stress how the albums in that series, if you can call it a series, but the albums that fall under that umbrella are some of my personal favorites of all time in popular music. So, anyways, enough rambling on my end. Let's get a discussion flowing in the comments. I appreciate any and all viewership. It means a lot that people, care to hear my ramblings about old records and new records, but mostly old ones. So keep tuning in, because I'll keep it coming at you. And this has been Matthew Buckley Talks Music with, also worth noting, here's the CD that has those liner notes I keep referencing. This has been Matthew Buckley Talks Music with Baron von Tollbooth and the Chrome Nun by Paul Kantner, Grace Slick, and David Freiberg. Music is the best.